Hi everyone, very good evening and welcome back to CrackGradeB. So in this particular session, we are going to talk about rural financial services, right? How they have started. In this particular series, we will also be talking about the NABARD's as well as the RBI's role, right? But subsequently, today we will be focusing on how the rural financial related setup has been set up in India. What has been progress of that, ठीक है? किस तरीके की प्रोग्रेस हुई है इन रूरल फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशंस की एंड बेसिकली वील बी आल्सो बी टॉकिंग अबाउट द टाइप्स ऑफ व्हाट यू कैन से स्कीम्स और द टाइप्स ऑफ स्टेप्स दैट द गवर्नमेंट हैज टेकन to strengthen these rural financial setup, right? So the topic for today that we are going to discuss is rural development financial setup. किस तरीके का फाइनेंशियल सेटअप हुआ है अपार्ट फ्रॉम आरबीआई एंड नाबार्ड, राइट? सो टुडे वी विल नॉट बी फोकसिंग ऑन द आरबीआई एंड नाबार्ड. आरबीआई नाबार्ड का डिस्कशन जो है अगले लेक्चर में होगा, नॉट इन टुडेज लेक्चर. सो लेट अस see and all the data that has been given in this particular lecture series is from NABARD's annual report, right? So that is our source, and from there all the what you can say the technical part or whatever are the parts related to data, right? So those things have been sourced from the credible sources. So I am already telling you the source so that there is no ambiguity about the credibility of data. So let us start talking about it. So rural financial institutions, they comprise rural cooperative banks as well as the regional rural banks. देखो, if we talk about, yes, commercial banks are also there. They also have their due while developing the rural economy through priority sector lending. उनका भी एक role होता है. But we will be discussing that separately when we will start discussing about the priority sector lending related chapter. अभी के लिए we are focusing just on the institutions which have been made for the rural India, जिनको rural India के लिए ही बनाया गया है for their development. So these are the two things that we will be focusing today, right? Rural cooperative banks and the regional rural banks. So these are the two that we will be focusing on. And now in order to improve the access of banking facilities in rural areas and transform these institutions into organizationally strong, financially viable and operationally efficient entities, NABARD endeavors to strengthen the capacity of these institutions through various developmental as well as the supervisory initiatives. So you will see that हम discuss करेंगे ऐसे बहुत सारे initiatives जो government ने और we can say these institutions have taken to develop the rural cooperatives and the regional rural banks in the year 2022 and 2023. So let us start talking about, हम सबसे पहले start कर रहे हैं a little bit of cooperatives history because we will be talking about rural cooperatives. तो बस बहुत ही थोड़ा part I have taken for the cooperatives history. This is not really very important, but yes, a little bit of history will not hurt us, है ना? So the Cooperative Credit Societies Act of India, it was enacted in 1904, although there were a lot of steps that were taken even before this, ठीक है? इससे पहले भी हम कह सकते हैं that at regional level बहुत सारे steps लिए गए थे, but this was one credible act that was done in the year of 1904. In 1912, another Cooperative Societies Act, it was passed to rectify some of the drawbacks that were existing in the earlier law. Understood. Cooperation became a state subject in the year 1919 because you will see in the 1919 there were some reforms that came known as the Montagu-Chelmsford reform and in Montfort reforms also called as. So in those particular reforms it was told that we will now have a list कि at a central level what is going to be the works as well as at the provincial level किस तरीके के काम जो है हम allocate करेंगे. And because of that, cooperation became a state subject in the year 1919. You will see, although now we have three lists, union list, state list as well as a concurrent list, yes, there are some what you can say diversions from state list to the concurrent list, but majority of the subjects, they remain same. Now, National Development Council, it suggested a national cooperative strategy as well as a staff training for the cooperative marketing societies in 1958. So these were the actions that were taken post independence. ठीक है, independence के बाद में for the improvement related part, this was something that was done. National Cooperatives Development Corporation, NCDC, it is a statutory corporation and it was set up under the National Cooperatives Development Corporation Act of 1962. Now, it is needless to tell you that yes, this particular organization is responsible for the developmental activities that are there in the cooperative segment. Now, these are some fact-based data which you have to just read, because if we'll say so, these are not very important. अभी हमारा topic है rural financial institutions setup, right? So this is our core topic. So उसके लिए हम एक बस थोड़ा सा base बना रहे हैं for cooperative. That is it. ठीक है, इसीलिए these data have been presented in this particular form. Then we will see a multi-state Cooperative Organizations Act. It was passed by the Indian Parliament in 1984. Government of India then announced a national policy on cooperatives in 2002 as envisaged by the National Development Council, right? And then Constitution 97th Amendment Act of 2011, it made cooperatives aim to promote cooperative economic activity, which in turn will aid the rural India's advancement. Great. So this was a little bit of history on the cooperatives. Now we will be talking about the रूरल कोऑपरेटिव बैंकिंग. सी, कोऑपरेटिव्स में अर्बन काउंटरपार्ट भी होता है और रूरल काउंटरपार्ट भी होता है, बट व्हाट वी आर फोकसिंग ओवर हियर इज बेसिकली रूरल. ठीक है, मैं यहाँ पे रूरल पे ही फोकस कर रही हूँ बिकॉज दैट्स व्हाट वी आर सपोज टू डू. So rural cooperative banks, these are established on the values of equality, openness, voluntary association, democracy, mutual support, self-reliance, as well as a non-exploitative operations. Right, now let's start with the short-term cooperatives. Let us see this. So in the cooperative banking ecosystem, the short-term cooperative credit structure, they consist of three types of the financial institutions. Number one, we have state cooperative banks, right? State cooperative banks. Now it will be denoted as this, state cooperative banks, right? Please remember this. Number two, it is followed by the district central cooperative bank, district central cooperative banks, right? So this comes at the district level. पहला हमारा state level पे है, उसके बाद में हमारा district level पे है, and finally at a village level we have primary agriculture credit societies at the village level, PACS, right? Primary agriculture credit society. Now these short-term cooperatives, they play a great role, and we will also discuss how their performance have been in the recent past. अभी किस तरीके का इनका रोल रहा है, right? However, historically, the role of short-term cooperative credit structure, STCCS means short-term cooperative credit structure, it was to provide only short-term crop loans to farmers through the primary agricultural credit society. That means when they were made, this was the only intention. ठीक है, यही intention था that we will be providing the short-term loans to the farmers through PACS, which has now widened to non-farm sector, term lending for the allied sectors, as well as the microfinance, etc. That means we are not just focused on to what you can say crop related loans. सिर्फ अब हम crop related loans पे ही focus नहीं है. It has what you can say diversified itself. You see, with the agriculture, now there is what you can say animal husbandry sector is also, that is called as an allied sector. ठीक है, silkworms हैं, beekeeping है, all these are called as the allied sector. So for that also finances would be made available through this short term cooperative credit structure, STCCS का मतलब ये. Now let us see what is the performance and financial health indicators of your state cooperative banks, right? So STCB, state cooperative banks, please remember. So short term जो आपका credit structure है, इसमें तीन तरीके की varieties हैं. First of all, we have a state level, then we have a district level, and then finally at a village level we have primary agriculture credit societies, right? So now let us see how the state cooperative banks have performed. So this particular data, it has been sourced from the NABARD annual report, right? So you can just totally trust it, and this is a credible data. Okay, so own funds of your state cooperative banks comprising of share capital and reserves, it grew by 11.5% during financial year 2022, and it stood at 27,000 crores as on 31st March 2022. Deposits also accounted for 57.8% of total liabilities, and this grew, and it stood at 2.4 lakh crores. Now this is something which is important, ठीक है, ये हमारे लिए जरूरी है. So the share of agricultural loans in the total loan portfolio, it increased from 44% as on 31st March 2021 to 46%. That means out of the total credit that has been provided by your state cooperative banks, out of that at least 40% goes towards the agricultural sector. So now you can see how big of a role they play for the development of rural economy. Now this was regarding the state cooperative banks. Now let us go and see what is happening at district level. ठीक है, district level पे क्या हो रहा है हम इस बारे में भी बात कर लेते हैं. See, so your district cooperative banks, they provide the loans to the affiliated societies or the primary agricultural credit societies, which directly disburse the credit to the end borrowers, right? So there is an indirect credit mechanism which is going on. They make available the credit to these kind of small agricultural credit societies which exist at a village level, and that is how they give the loan further. So own funds of these particular district cooperative credit comprising of share capital and reserves, it grew by 8.9%, right? And then the deposits, they stood at 4.1 lakh crores, right? And now let us talk about the agricultural loans. So the share of agricultural loans in the total loan portfolio of these district cooperative credit, it increased from 53% to 55% as on 31st March 2022. About 77% of the total loan portfolio and 96.7% of agri loan portfolio is towards the credit societies, right? So agricultural loan में जितना भी कुछ जाता है, agriculture related loan, whatever these district credit cooperatives they give, they not directly give to customers, but they give it these kind of loans to PACS, that is primary agricultural credit societies, and through them these kind of loans they are disbursed to the farmers. ठीक है, तब ये loans जो है farmers को disburse किए जाते हैं. Moving ahead and talking about long term cooperatives. Let us see this. Wait. So long term, we have seen short term cooperatives, right? And what are the levels of short term cooperatives and how have been the performance of this? How much of now you have to understand they just not only give the credit to the agriculture, but also to the allied activities, right? So that is also something that they cater to. Now talking about long-term cooperatives, let us see this. So long-term cooperative credit structure, it comprises state cooperative agriculture, number one, right? Then primary cooperative agriculture at the district or taluka level in some states, and then this particular long-term cooperative structure, it has functional state cooperative agriculture in 13 states and union territories, right? So they only have two levels of it. Number one operates at state cooperative agriculture and rural development banks, right? The short form is like this: State Cooperative Agriculture Rural Development Bank, and then we have Primary Cooperative Agriculture and Rural Development Bank. State is obviously at state level and the primary one is at a district level. These are for the long-term needs, long-term cooperatives. Now let us see how have been their performances. See, so as agriculture and the rural development banks, they are not allowed, wait, They are not allowed to raise deposits from the public, which is repayable on demand. They are heavily dependent on the borrowed funds for their operations. So you have to remember these state cooperatives. And one more thing I would like to mention over here. If you remember, there is deposit guarantee cooperation, right? Deposit guarantee cooperation, and you will see that such kind of banks, these are not in the list of deposit guarantee cooperation. Why they are not there? Because see, as they have mentioned that agriculture and the rural development related banks, they do not source deposits from the public. इनको public से कोई deposit नहीं मिलता. तो जब public से कोई deposit नहीं मिलता, then obviously their deposits does not have a guarantee as well. ठीक है? मतलब जब कोई डिपॉजिट्स ही नहीं है तो देयर इज नो क्वेश्चन ऑफ गारंटी, एंड द सेकंड लेवल दे आर heavily dependent on to the borrowed funds, right? Now let's see the important developments in the context of rural cooperative credit structure. So we are going to see wait for a second. Yes, just give me a moment. Yes. So let's talk about the important developments in context of rural cooperative credit structure. That means over here we will be talking about the developments or the steps that the government has been taken, or the steps that have been taken at what you can say regulatory level to improve the finances, right? To improve the financial availability to the for the rural development. Let us see this. So with the formation of separate ministry for the cooperatives in the financial year 2022. So we have formed a separate ministry for the cooperatives, that is Ministry for Cooperation, to achieve the vision Sehkar se Samriddhi, right? So this is the vision that we are having, Sehkar se Samriddhi, cooperation for the prosperity. This is the vision for Government of India. It has undertaken several initiatives in collaboration with various stakeholders so that the cooperative movement can be strengthened in the country. Now let us see what have been the steps that have been taken. Now next, first one is the scheme for the computerization of primary agricultural credit societies. Now we understand that these are the grassroots level organizations, right? They work with the what you can say farmers as well as the other rural inhabitants, and they work as a direct contact for us. So what we are envisaging, this is one of the component over here. This is the scheme for their computerization. So Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs on 29 June 2022, they have approved this particular scheme so that standard business processes and operational efficiency can be implemented in the PACS level as well, right? So that they can offer a wide level of services, they can reduce the delays in loan sanction, right? Wide range of services can be granted, transparency and accountability can be there, timely decision making could be there. So these are the things for which the PACS are needed to be computerized. Now next scheme that is there is called as Committee on the National Policy on Cooperation. So a national level committee. Now, what we are talking about over here is the steps that have been taken related to cooperatives. Okay? So, National Level Committee, it was constituted on 2nd September 2022 under Chairperson Suresh Prabhakar Prabhu. Please remember, right, the name of the committee for the National Policy on Cooperation. So under Suresh Prabhakar Prabhu, this particular committee has been constituted. It consists of cooperative sector experts so that new national cooperation policy can be formulated to realize the vision of Sehkar se Samriddhi and strengthen the cooperative movement, right? Next we have creation of National Cooperatives Database. And see, for the success of any particular scheme, what you need is the database, because without a database you cannot have a success, right? So National Cooperatives Database is preparation of an authentic and updated repository of cooperatives in the country. It has been initiated by Ministry of Cooperation so that there is a single point access to information on the cooperatives of different sectors. The database, it would facilitate planning, formulation, implementation of appropriate policies for the cooperative sector. Next is recapitalization assistance to the domestic cooperative credit banks in the Jammu and Kashmir. So under the Government of India, schemes for revival of 23 unlicensed the district cooperative credit banks was launched in the year 2014. Under this particular scheme, consequent upon the release of entire share of recapitalization assistance for the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir to its three district cooperative credit banks, the Government of India share of recapitalization was released in full by the NABARD, right? So these kind of recapitalization related assistance are also being provided so that these cooperative banks can gain strength and they can provide the loans in furtherance to the primary agriculture credit societies as well. Moving ahead and talking about enhancement in individual housing loan limits and permission to finance the commercial real estates. So let us see this. See. So Reserve Bank of India, in a notification which has been dated 8 June 2022, it enhanced the individual housing loan limits that can be extended by the state cooperative banks as well as the district cooperative credit banks. In addition, it permitted them to finance commercial real estate, residential housing within the existing aggregate housing finance limit of 5% of the total assets. Right? So you have to remember that yes, they can finance your state cooperative banks as well as the district cooperative credit banks. They can finance the real estate related thing as well, but there is a limit onto the financing, that is 5%, right? So housing finance jo 5% ki limit hai, in that now they can finance the commercial real estate as well, right? Not just the residential or not just the housing related, but commercial as well, but within the finance limit of 5%. So this was, see, cooperatives in itself is a lengthy topic, but when we are just focusing on to the rural counterpart, now this is something that we need to understand. तो हमने किस बारे में बात की? We talked about how the cooperative setup is there in India. Specifically for the rural areas, and then we talked about how is their performance in the recent past, how is their deposits are doing, what is the loan portfolio, right, what kind of loans they can provide. So these are the things that we also talked about. We also talked about the long term cooperative banks, that there are twin levels at which they operate. First one at the state level and then at the district level. Followed by, we also discussed that what are the recent steps that have been taken. These are just a bird eye view, although these have not been mentioned in your syllabus, but yet we have covered it. These are the things that the government has taken steps for the cooperatives, and this is the bare minimum that you need to remember. Now next is lastly Cooperative Development Fund. So it was created in the financial year 1993 with a corpus of 10 crore from the profit of NABARD. Okay. So what you have to remember is when this particular fund was created, and this particular fund is formulated under which entity? So it is under NABARD. This is it. Now next let's talk about the regional rural banks. Now on this particular topic we are going to move slowly, and we will be talking about that why. So whenever we talk about the rural financial setup, these are the topics that concerns us a lot. Okay, first of all the cooperative and then your regional rural banks. Now let us see one by one how it is like. Now regional rural banks, they were established in accordance with the provision of an ordinance, and then it was followed by the Regional Rural Banks Act 1976, right? So it was set up through a statutory legislation, and hence the primary goal of this RRBs was to end the rural debt culture, okay, and close the credit gap. Regional rural banks, they are operationally sponsored by the scheduled banks, which are typically public sector commercial banks, right? So now you will see that in the operation of regional rural banks, there is a combined support from the government as well as the sponsor bank. पैसा किसने लगाया है. And number 2, that is a difference between a regional rural bank and let's say a commercial bank is commercial bank's area of operation geographically is not limited. ठीक है, इनका area of operation geographically is not limited, but when we talk about regional rural banks, their area of operation is limited one. ठीक है, इनका area of operation is not that much what you can say wide. Next is the central government, state government, Reserve Bank of India, as well as the smaller banks, they all work together to establish new RRBs and assist them in their operations. So it is a joint effort. Since 1978, RBI has primarily carried out promotional functions, while the state governments, they have carried out the statutory functions. Promotional functions का क्या होता है? That for all any sort of promotional support, or if any form of what you can say initiation support that has been done by the RBI, but at the end of the day what has been written in the act to perform this particular act is done by the state governments when we talk about regional rural banks. Regional rural banks, they are jointly owned by the government of India, relevant state government. So ownership is like this, you see, jointly owned by the Indian government as well as the state governments and then sponsor banks. The issued capital of the regional rural banks is divided among the owners in proportion of 50%, 15% and 35% respectively. 50% is going to be the share of government of India, right? 15% is the share of your state governments, right? Respective state governments, and then 35% is the share of your sponsor bank. Now again, if you have missed, one thing that you need to notice is sponsor banks are usually your public sector commercial banks, right? So they provide their support, they provide the funding related support, because see, 35% of the capital is being contributed by the sponsor bank, that is your public sector bank. And what do? By this particular contribution of capital, they are putting their share of contribution for the development of a rural area specifically, है ना. तो commercial banks not only through the priority sector lending but also by the way of regional rural banks, they do contribute in the development of rural areas. Okay. Now talking about the current setup. So regional rural banks, these are the unique category of rural financial institution, and they are there in order to attain the goal of financial inclusion, right? As on 31st March 2022, there were 43 regional rural banks sponsored by 12 scheduled commercial banks with 21,892 branches across 26 states and the 3 union territories, that is Puducherry, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, with operations extending to 29.7 crore deposits account and 2.7 crores loan accounts. Of the regional rural branches, 92% are in the rural and semi-urban areas. Now this is what our intention is, and this particular data is a very recent data that is available with us, right? So total 43 regional rural banks. What they are doing is 92% of their branches are in the rural areas, obviously, because this is the intention for which they are set up with. Their area of operations are in the 26 states as well as 3 union territories, and there are 12 scheduled commercial banks that those who have sponsored these particular regional rural banks. Now let's talk about the finances as well. Finances के बारे में भी बात करते हैं. So yes, financial year 2023, it was a watershed year with the infusion of 10,890 crores into RRBs, okay, including Government of India share 50% share, that is 5,445 crores. This particular recapitalization scheme, along with the operational and governance reforms, it aims to revitalize these regional rural banks with sufficient growth capital so that sustainable and self-sufficient financial institutions can be led in the rural India, right? Now, what is the performance and financial health indicators of regional rural banks? So this is also something that we need to look for, because this is the what you can say the present performance indicators for the regional rural banks, how they are performing in the rural India. See, as on 31st March 2022, the RRBs, they have the highest share of current account and savings account deposit, 54.5% as a percentage of their total deposits amongst all categories of scheduled commercial bank. Public sector banks 43.8%, private sector banks 47%, small finance bank 40.5%, and foreign banks 43.8%. So that's what we are saying over here is that regional rural banks are leading in this particular category. What is this category? Highest share of current account and savings account deposit as a percentage of their total deposits. ठीक है, total deposits में there are different kinds of deposits. For example, term deposit, fixed deposit, all of these deposits, they all also come into the picture, right? So such kind of deposits having a lesser share, but the current as well as the savings kind of deposit, they are having higher share. Now, what you can say, what is the importance of it? So if you will see the expenses that a bank has to incur in, I'm talking interest wise, right? The returns that they have to give to depositors. When we consider the returns that they have to give to the depositors, and we will see the current account and the savings account in this particular category, they have to pay less. ठीक है, उनको कम पे करना पड़ता है. And this is why it is also, apart from this particular expense related phenomena, the second phenomena is, yes, they contribute to what you can say capital base, but there is a negative side to it as well. Negative side kya hai? This is a volatile base, right? Volatile base through which you can raise your loans, because at any particular time you can have a demand for the withdrawal. So is tarike se, yes, there are positives as well, but the negatives are also equally responsible over here, putting them as an advantage vis-a-vis access to low cost funds. So this is what I have explained. If you see the ranking, यहाँ पे RRBs are leading, followed by scheduled commercial banks. Private sector banks, they are also having a good share of deposits. They are low cost of funds because current account में practically there is no interest, and in the savings account, interest is there, but it is really low if you compare it with a fixed deposit. है ना? The fact that almost 90% of the gross loans that are outstanding of regional rural banks, these are towards the priority sector, speaks of the contribution of regional rural banks to inclusive nation building, right? So 90% of their gross loans, right, total credit that they are being providing is towards the priority sector. Regional rural banks, they have a higher mandate as well, that they have to provide a significant share of their what you can say loan portfolio towards the priority sector. That is also there, but even if we ignore that, they are doing much above than what they are required to do at 90%. So this is it that I want to discuss in today's class. I hope you would have understood the topic that I wanted to discuss, right? If you did, then please do not forget to like this particular video. One more thing that I want to tell you is that in this regional rural banks as well as the cooperatives part, I have not covered the priority sector lending related norms, right? That is also a significant part of it, priority sector lending. Why I have not covered? Because we are having a different topic and we are going to cover all such priority sector norms related thing over there under one head. So here I have tried to cover the basics and the general, what you can say, general data regarding these kind of institutions, right? So before you point out that okay, priority sector has not been covered, so that has been an intentional thing that will be covered later on with other things. We will soon be launching this, Miku, right? So we'll be launching this soon. Thank you so much for joining in, and if you did understood the class really well, then please do not forget to like this video. Good night.